Folks, if we could ask you to take your seats, we're about to commence. We're going to start with a very brief welcome from Alan Reinhardt, who's the president of the Nantucket Civic League. Alan?
Great. Thank you, Peter. Again, welcome on behalf of the Nantucket Civic League. The purpose of the Civic League, or part of the purpose of the Civic League, is to promote citizen awareness of community issues. And we do this through the forums that we present, such as Meet the Articles, Meet the Candidates, our recent Old South Road Forum. These forums and the programs we do are possible because of the approximately 2,200 members that we have in the Nantucket Civic League. Members join the Civic League by joining the local area association. So I would encourage you, if you're not a member of your local area association, contact us. We'll be glad to put you in touch. The dues are only $5 for the Civic League, and it is the executive board of the Civic League. There are 16 of us that work and put these programs together. And Peter Morrison, one of the members of our executive committee, is going to moderate the program for this afternoon. So anyway, welcome to Meet the Articles. Peter?
Welcome, everyone. I'll tell you briefly about the format, but first I'd like to ask our three panelists to come down for the first block of topic areas that we're going to cover. Today's program, as you know, is designed to inform you, today's attendees, and also many more voters who will be viewing the subsequent rebroadcasts of this program on Channel 18 and Channel 99. The articles that we're featured today fall into 5 topic areas, and if you don't have a copy of the blue program, please get one for yourself. For each topic area, I've asked the presenters listed on the program to give you a very brief overview, 2 to 3 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to written questions from you, the audience, so that we can have the bulk of the time for Q&A. For each topic area, we're hoping to reserve about 15 minutes for your questions. I'd like to ask that you submit your questions in writing on a card, and if you want to do that, just raise your hand at any time, and our volunteers who are situated around the room will furnish a pen and a card, and then they'll deliver your questions to me here, and I'll try to give them in some rational order. Our first topic area involves 2 land acquisition articles, Article number 103 and Article 34. First, we're going to hear from Rick Atherton, Chair of the Board of Selectmen, for 2 to 3 minutes. Next, we'll hear from David Callahan, a private citizen. And lastly, we'll hear the Finance Committee's view, courtesy of its chairman, Matt Mulcahy, for 2 to 3 minutes. So let me start with you, Rick.
Okay, thanks, Peter. And welcome, everybody, to Meet the Articles. My assignment is to talk about Article 103 on the warrant this year. The article is designed to authorize or ask permission of town meeting for the Board of Selectmen to be able to move forward, and I'll describe a little bit more, to purchase 45 acres near Nantucket on the west end of the island. And maybe just to back up a little bit, the property, the 45 acres, is just south of the landfill, and it's east of Long Pond. It's been open space for many years, was controlled by the Federal Aviation Administration, and when they determined the land was surplus for federal government use, the disposer of property on behalf of the federal government is the General Services Administration. So administration of the property was turned over to the GSA, and the town had a special interest, really not as much today, but years ago, because there was talk of whether or not a wastewater treatment facility to serve Nantucket would be located on that property. Since then, we've been in the process as a town in updating our comprehensive wastewater management plan, and it is very unlikely that a treatment plant will ever be needed on that property. The GSA, just backing up again, has a whole proscribed method for disposing of government property, and it offers it first to some entities and second to others. In that process, we're at the point now where the town and the GSA are in talks for a negotiated disposition or purchase of the property. And the town is working closely in conjunction with the Land Bank, the Nantucket Land Council, and other conservation organizations, as well as island-wide and sometimes more specifically Nantucket residents, in terms of making sure the resources necessary to purchase the land are available. It's a cooperative effort at this point. The purpose of the article was that if we felt, as the Board of Selectmen, through our town manager discussing the process by which this would be sold, had a purchase price, then we could come to town meeting, and if in the negotiations amongst the interested parties, the town should ask for the citizens to appropriate funds specifically to assist in the purchase, we would have done so. The process calls for appraisals to be made by the GSA and appraisals to be commissioned by the prospective purchaser. Those appraisals are not yet available, and therefore we don't know what the negotiated price would be, and therefore we don't know what portion of the price might be something we would come to the town for. The Community Preservation Committee has recommended on this warrant, I believe it's $650,000, to be available through the Nantucket Land Council towards the purchase of the property. We know the Land Bank has an interest, and it's hoped that when the negotiated settlement is finally arranged, we would come back to town meeting, know what that price is, and have a much better feel for the contributions of the various entities interested in this acquisition to reach a final settlement with the GSA. At that time, as I say, we would come back and discuss it further with town meeting. But in the light of the fact we're not ready, we're asking the town meeting take no action on the article. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Rick. Again, if you have any questions, raise your hand, and we're going to move on to the Egan land acquisition article, which is Article 34, and I'm going to call on David Callahan in his capacity as a private citizen.
I asked the selectmen to put this article on as a warrant article up because I thought that this 2.6 acres that abutted Mill Hill Park or Dead Horse Valley was important to contribute to keep that area pristine. It's an area I've enjoyed for a long time for dog walking or just nice in-town walks. It's a very special, peaceful place that's central to town. It's a historic place. It's a place where generations of children have done their sledding and everything else. It's interesting that I'm here before the Civic League because this land 102 years ago was given to the Civic League. And the Civic League then gave it to the town in 1963. In keeping with adding this Egan property to Mill Hill Park, it has been added to several times over the years. There's 6.8 acres came from the old Medeiros farm that was adjacent to it and added to it. Nancy Severance gifted 2.1 acres in 2007. And the Civic League, I think, and did a commemorative there in 2012, did a very nice map on the park, and commend you for that. It's a wonderful piece. The Board of Selectmen have decided not to support this article, and and I read from one of the selectmen in the newspaper that it's a $10 million project. It is nowhere near that cost, and there isn't a cost to it in the warrant article, or which would go on the ballot, because that's yet to be determined. It might be there's a developer that already has the property under agreement. It might be that we just could work a deal with the developer that we would buy the outside pieces of this to keep the park more pristine so that we don't see the houses when walking through the park. There's been other things that have tried to go on through this park. There was a ropes course that the police department wanted to donate there one time, which was successfully turned down, so the park could stay the way it has for the last 100 years. It really preserves open space in the core district, which is something we don't see much of. The land bank, for whatever reason, it had decided not to pursue this, which is why I decided it would be good to bring it to town voters to get their opinion on whether they wanted to contribute a little bit of money to afford more open space in the core area.
Very good. And finally, I'd like to call on Matt Mulcahy to offer the Finance Committee's views on each of these articles?
Sure, yeah, that'd be fine. Thank you for inviting me as representing the Finance Committee before you. As you know, the committee meets vigorously throughout the winter to prepare motions leading up to town meeting. As for 103, the committee did make a motion, take no action, and pretty much I cannot add anything additional to what Mr. Atherton had said. It's just as all the circumstances were not ready at this time. And so hopefully at a subsequent town meeting that all the i's will be dotted and t's will be crossed and this can be brought back for a decision at that time. As for Article 34, the Finance Committee did make a motion to take no action, and we would ask you to do so for a number of reasons. Certainly, the open space is the committee is very sensitive on that topic, and after much research and discussion about it, did come ahead with this motion to take no action. The committee felt that moving forward in this project would not be in the town's best interest at this time in light of other impending capital projects. This motion would have required a specific cash appropriation that Mr. Callahan said, and I agree with, was not to determine, but it was upwards of over $7 million from what we were provided with information of. And again, in light of other capital projects, the committee felt a little bit tepid about supporting that. There is already an existing zoning-ready plan for potential development, unlike other potential open space acquisitions that needs to be considered. And the governing bodies feel that the private sector forces should play out that are already set in motion on this. So that was
Very good.
overall our feelings. Thank you.
I have two questions from the audience, and the first one is really a two-part question they're both regarding Article 103. First, what is the town's intended use of the property, the FAA land acquisition? Is it conservation only or some other use? And the second question is, what are alternative uses if we don't obtain it? So there are two parts of this question, and I don't know if either of you wants to take a stab at it.
Well, I'll take a stab at the first one.
All right.
In the intention of the town would be to keep this in conservation and open space, though there was language in the article that would potentially use, or this land could be used for possible sewer beds in the distant future, though unlikely. As for the second part of your question, I'm not sure, so I'll defer to Mr. Atherton.
Well, I think the zoning of the property either has been changed or is recommended to be changed to, I think it's the Moorlands Management Area, and that calls for minimum lot sizes of, I think it's 10 acres. I'm looking out at Andrew Vorst, thank you. And the footprint of any buildings on those lots is quite restricted. So the alternative, if the town doesn't move forward in conjunction with the land bank and other conservation groups, it could be acquired by a private developer and subdivided in accordance with the existing zoning. So that's sort of another possibility.
Okay, and second question on Article 103, why will we not need the land for a Nantucket wastewater treatment system? What are we doing instead? Anybody have an answer for that?
Well, I'd be happy to tackle that. The Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan update, which is not out yet, but it's pretty clear that one of the options being considered if sewering of Nantucket proceeds is to have a pipe, if you will, running from Nantucket to the Surfside wastewater treatment plant. It's expected that the cost of running that pipe with the pumps and all the infrastructure related to that would be significantly less than putting a treatment plant itself in Nantucket. So there's the alternative. And as Matt referred to, because that's not absolutely final yet, but it's like 99.9%, that's the understanding. The article did call to allow the town to use a portion of that. I know that there have been some discussions about citizens wanting to amend the article to remove the wastewater element from the article, and that might happen at a future town meeting when the article comes back.
Okay, we have another question on Article 34. It says, if Article 34 passes, will the town be enabled to apply for CPC funds for open space?
I think off the top of my head, I would say yes.
Yeah, much as the Land Council, for example, applied to the CPC for funds this year for the FAA property acquisition, I think any entity, including the town, are free to make application to the CPC under the open space section of the Community Preservation Act monies. So,
Okay, and since we are ahead of schedule and I have no more questions pertaining directly to the land acquisition articles, I'm going to entertain one from Craig Sperry, who is here and would like to speak to Article 90, if there is time, and yes, there is time. So Craig, if you want to come forward and avail yourself of, I would try that mic there because I didn't have much luck with this one.
Do I have time to hand out a handout to people?
I think you have time if you can keep your comments very brief. We have about 8 minutes left in this segment, so, and there may be more questions coming up.
Peter, if we're moving on to another segment, are you letting the three of us step down, or we
Yes, yes, you may
stand?
step
Thank
down.
you.
Thank you.
Pardon? We could take it up, I'm not sure if it's 106, and I guess I could. What is 106 about? And I don't know who it's from. Yeah, right, okay.
Hi, Peter.
Okay, hi.
I'd spoken to Mary previously about being on the agenda. So.
Right, well, this was, it was focused in on just these, but since there's time, go ahead.
Great,
You know.
okay. Just start?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay.
Yeah, just speaking.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Craig Sperry. I am the sponsor of Article 90. There's a info sheet going around the auditorium at the moment that gives the basics of what Article 90 is. For those of you that remember, at last year's town meeting, I put forth a similar article. Although it didn't win, it did, I think, pretty well for a first time out and for somewhat of a controversial topic. The difference this year with Article 90, it's new and improved, and the major difference is what we're asking the people to vote on is to give new employees of the town a choice in their pension plan, whether they choose the existing Barnstable County retirement system or a 401k. And that's basically it. It boils down to giving employees a choice. Cost-wise, it's as some people say, cost neutral. From what the information we've received from Barnstable County, a new employee, when they contribute to their pension plan, as we were explained by Deborah Cohen, who's the executive director for Barnstable County last week when she met with the finance committee, she explained that in effect, a new employee funds their own pension plan. Well, the same would be true for a 401k. When a new employee starts, they start funding a 401k. There's no input by the town. There's no cost to the town for funding a 401k. So from that standpoint, I would think that why not give a new employee a choice? If anything, it's going to make hiring an employee, which is sometimes difficult on Nantucket, more attractive. one of the reasons of offering this, besides Barnstable County, they have a 10-year vesting period. So you have to work there for 10 years to be vested into the Barnstable County retirement system. With a 401k, it vests right away. And more importantly, if you look at the average length of time at a job, right now, if you do a Google search, it's 4.6 years. So that's well below your 10-year vesting period. So that gives a prospective employee the option of saying, look, I could consider working for Nantucket, but the idea of working there for 10 years and getting vested, that's not as attractive as saying, okay, I can go work there for however long, have my retirement funded, and take it with me. And I think that's an attractive feature these days in the marketplace. The idea of working one job for one company for your entire life, that doesn't happen nearly as often these days. So I think it's important that Nantucket makes ourselves as attractive in the marketplace as possible, and voting yes on Article 90 is a step in that direction. It should be noted that, and if you're looking at your, and I'll entertain questions if
Yeah,
if
actually,
so
I'd like
allowed.
to take time for one question because we have to move on
Okay.
with the program. One question is, why not wait until the town's wage and benefit study is completed?
And that's a fair question. And that study is scheduled to be presented April 30th. And, we don't know what's going to be in the study, of course. And this would be a part of it, of course. What this does, what Article 90 does, is basically get Nantucket in the queue. When there's a home rule petition, it goes to Boston, and they basically have to allow Nantucket to do what Article 90 is asking, to give employees a choice, to let them be in the traditional pension plan or allow them into a 401k. Just because we say it amongst ourselves doesn't make it so. We have to now go to Boston and have them say, yes, Nantucket, you can now provide a 401k program. So why not now? Why not get into the queue? Why not take the poll of the voters? And if we agree this is a good idea, tell Boston we want this choice, now. It's going to take, you know how things go. It's going to take a while for this to go through the motions. And in the meantime, the wage and study is coming, the wage and benefit study is coming in. In fact, if you look at this year's warrant with the recommendations, the FinCom motion is to come up with, the FinCom, I have it here.
I'm going to have to stop here because we have actually one other question, or actually one other person, two people who wanted to address Article 106, and we have about 3 minutes for, I'm going to call on Mr. Glowacki, who's submitted a question. Simply says stabilization fund. If you have something to say, if you're here, come up to the mic and give us maybe a 1-minute overview of what you have to say, and possibly we can get.
1 minute.
Thanks, Craig.
Sure. Can I say?
We have the time, so
No, I
I'll
understand.
squeeze in what we can from the audience.
Because time is
Yeah.
tight, if people have questions, feel free to ask me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Craig will be around. Okay, do you want to come up here and speak into the mic? Meanwhile, I'll get
On
a
the way to the
second.
mic, I'll just comment, when does my time start? I'll just say that I always find it interesting how the Civic League determines what the topics are for the section they
You
have
should
here.
attend our meetings and you'll find out.
I've gone to those executive board meetings in the past, and the door is locked, and they say they're doing important work, and they'll let me in later on.
Okay, so give us a quick overview of what you're.
Well, my question really had to do with the long-term planning and municipal finance, and I understand, I was just looking up the minutes for the capital program committee. I couldn't find them. I guess I haven't made it yet. But my understanding is that the capital program committee recommended to the finance committee that we take some of our remaining free cash and dedicate it to long-term reserves this year. And the finance committee and the board of selectmen have both apparently recommended not to do that. And some of you might remember that last year, under this article on free cash, that at town meeting, I made a proposal to take the last of our remaining, half of the last of our remaining free cash, put it in the stabilization fund long-term. It's a complicated topic for 1 minute, but that requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting, and my proposal failed on a vote of 99 to 50, falling short something like 0.3 something or other of a vote. And I had a lot of comment following that. encouraging me to continue to sort of look into this and study this and have discussion. And I really anticipated, and I was told by some of the selectmen that there would be more discussion of that in the intervening year since last town meeting. And other than the Board of Selectmen agenda item a few weeks ago in February that was labeled stabilization fund policy, but actually was about other matters, I'm not aware of much public discussion on the policy. And I'm just surprised to see both the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen recommending against funding that fund further this year. And we will be discussing it at town meeting. And I would think there would be it would be a matter that would benefit from sort of airing out in public.
Okay, we're alerted to that. And I'd like to move on now to our second topic area, which is Articles 92 through 95, which pertain to Baxter Road zoning changes. And Andrew Vorse, Director of Planning, is going to inform you about these 4 articles. Andrew?
Thank you. So I guess I'll get started here. On the program, you have Articles 92 through 95 listed as zoning, and I just want to clarify that Articles 92 and 95 are related to a home rule petition, Article 92. Article 93 through 95 is real estate related to Baxter Road and a perpendicular road towards the end. There are 2 other articles that relate somewhat to Baxter Road, which I'm going to mention, which are Article 70 regarding the extension of a sewer district, and Article 58, which is the actual zoning article related to a portion of Baxter Road in Sconset. I think everyone understands this particular problem. This is the end of Baxter Road from Bayberry, which is a dead ends at the Sanctity Lighthouse property. The issue for the town is that should portions of Baxter Road fail, and there would be a need to provide access to people in the section that might no longer be used for a road, we need to work to create some sort of an access or alternative access. There are at least 3 main stakeholders in that area. There's the Sanctity Head Golf Course, there is private property owners and the Sconset Trust. And we, meaning the selectmen, myself acting as a resource, the town manager, and other town personnel, have been engaged in, I would say, quite extensive negotiations with property owners to work on a solution. These articles empower the selectmen. They are they're elective articles. They don't have to be done. However, the selectmen need to have authorization from the legislative body in order to do some actions. Article 92, the home rule petition, would allow the county to transfer the land comprising of Baxter Road to the town. That simplifies decision-making as it is now divided among 2 bodies, the county commissioners controlling the road and the town controlling other adjacent land. So this article would put all decision-making under the Board of Selectmen and town meeting, essentially bringing local control to the issue. Article 93 would authorize, again, the Board of Selectmen to convey any interest in the land, and that might be all of the land, the fee ownership, or it might be rights of passage in the land, which might be necessary for some of the adjacent property owners. Articles 94 and 95 deal with a paper road that's perpendicular to Baxter Road near the end of it. What that would do would be to connect Baxter Road to a proposed road currently being laid out by the county in the vicinity of the Sanctity Head Golf Club. They have worked quite hard to come up with a proposal that would be of low or no cost to the town to provide at least an access point to this paper road, which then extends for another 100 or so feet to Baxter Road. So again, this authorizes the selectmen to take the way and bring it under public control and also to convey interests or portions of it out, should that be necessary. Article 70 and Article 58 deal with an area that is located to the west of Baxter Road, property between Sankaty Pulpus and Baxter Road. We had hoped that we would have an opportunity to negotiate with a group of property owners in this area for alternative access. To date, that has not materialized. So I expect that Article 70 and Articles 58 will receive a vote of no action as part of the technical amendments that will proceed.
Very good. We have one question here, which is not really a question so much as where can we see the maps? Does Andrew have maps? I think the answer is not right now for these articles. But can you tell us where we can view them on the website?
Right, on the town's website, if you go to town meeting and elections and go to the 2014 annual town meeting, there will be a map that shows all of these particular properties.
There's no question we got maps.
There's a lot of maps.
A lot of maps.
Right.
Okay, all right, very good.
I will say, too, there's an extensive section on the Selectmen's website talking about the whole Baxter Road issue, and there's quite a number of documents there as well.
Okay. Very good. We are well ahead of schedule, and I would like to call now, if there are no more questions on these articles, I would like to call on Matt Mulcahy again from the Finance Committee and Linda Williams, who chairs the HDC, for our second topic area, which is Article 87, which involves restructuring of the Historic District Commission. Then what I'll do is, I think what I'll do is I'll see if there are any other articles that people want to talk about. All right.
Thank you.
Linda's not here yet, so we may do this in a two-part,
Okay.
or we may.
While we're waiting, if you wouldn't mind, there were some comments made about 106.
All right.
And just to give a rationale, I think this is a great topic to discuss, dealing with long-term finances and town reserves. The Finance Committee did take a motion to take no action, and really in response to the fact that there is a policy in place that is being fulfilled to the T. There is, and I'm going off the top of my head, so don't quote me, I believe $3.7+ million in the stabilization fund, and which again fulfills a policy that was instituted in 2005. The stabilization fund, another name of it, is called the rainy day fund, and the intention is to be used in time of need. To put money into this fund, it requires a vote at town meeting of a quantum of 2/3. To take money out requires the same. So it really is into the hands of the voters to do this. My advice would be or what I feel, speaking for the committee, if we want to put more money into this fund, then we need to look at altering the policy. But the committee does take its role seriously and tries to follow the policy to the letter of the law on that. Thank you.
This question asks Matt whether he is prepared to discuss Article 91, Catherine Stover's article regarding funeral service on island.
I can talk a little bit.
Again, we have the time to do it, so
sure, not
take the
that.
time.
If I can, I'll try.
Sure.
I should be prepared to talk about all these articles. This was a citizen's article, a home rule petition, to alter how regulations are for funeral homes, and the committee's motion was moved to take no action. And with a comment, and I'll read here, the state has rules and regulations in place to protect citizens in terms of this industry, and the committee is not convinced that the Nantucket needs to be exempted. As we are all aware that in the last few months, the only funeral home on this island has closed, and that is no longer a commercial property, I understand, is a residential, and there is no funeral home. And the capitalistic forces are in place for companies that have come off island and seem to be filling the void. Again, the committee is just not convinced that any regulations need to be changed at this time.
Good. We are well ahead of schedule, so what I would like to do is now ask you, Matt, to turn to your part of the third block, which is the HDC restructuring, and we can allow you to have even more than 3 minutes.
You should never open that door, no.
Let's make it 5.
This is an article, again, a home rule petition, Article 87, that is sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. And the idea is to alter how the Historic District Commission is constituted. And the Finance Committee voted to adopt this article. And an overview for this is that the Historic Commission is vital to maintain the fabric of Nantucket that we've come to appreciate and call home. And the committee, again, takes that very seriously. Since its inception, the committee has worked diligently to preserve the character and architecture unique to this island. Though the Finance Committee has the utmost respect for the HDC commissioners and the amount of time they devote to public service, it is a contention of the Finance Committee that this commission needs to be more responsive in the face of demands placed on it by all the duties it performs. The Finance Committee supports the board-sponsored article to institute a change on how Historic District Commission members are selected. This legislation, if passed, will institute the following changes. 3 commissioners will be elected to 3-year terms, 1 per year. Thus, the majority of the board will still be elected. 2 members will be appointed by the board for 2-year terms. That's where the change comes in. It will be a hybrid. 3 members elected, 2 members appointed. Alternates also will be appointed by the board. Some of the reasons for the support of this change are as follows. It is one part of a multifaceted approach to make the HDC more responsive to applicants, professionals, and the community, including delineation of staff responsibilities and changes to the process of evaluating applications. Right now, this commission and staff are ripe to become more efficient. To introduce flexibility to the selection process of the commissioners, it is felt that by having a Board of Selectmen participation in the appointment process, a wider range of candidates can be chosen. A prime example of this flexibility at work is the current Board of Health. These are appointed positions that, if elected, it would be more difficult to fill and be more difficult to attract qualified candidates. And the last point is there are numerous communities in the Commonwealth that have their Historic District Commission elected and appointed such as this proposal, and it works very well. So, try to keep it short.
Okay. What I'm going to do at this point, since we are running a bit early and Linda Williams is not here, what I'm going to do is put off that part of her presentation, so we'll return to the HDC restructuring after we deal with the third topic area, which is Article 80, where are we here? The fourth topic area, which is downtown parking regulations. This is going to be Articles 74 and 75, and I'm going to ask the Chair of the Board of Selectmen, Rick Atherton, and Police Chief Pittman to come up, and we'll take that, and then we'll return to the HDC if Linda Williams is here. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I was going to do that. Okay. You can position yourself as you desire.
Whatever works.
Good. And take a little more time if you need to, because we have ample time, I think.
Peter's making sure Bill and I know we have ample time. So here we go. Parking. The Board of Selectmen has, over the past couple of years, or maybe longer, been very interested in the parking problems downtown and has undertaken a number of often sometimes small steps to modify the parking regulations in order to provide more access and more turnover. The members of our current board, who are our parking experts, Bruce Miller and Matt Fee, are both off island, and I'm representing sort of the board's perspective on this today. The board works through the town manager and the chief of police in terms of parking enforcement regulations, and the chief is the better expert than I am in terms of what the regulations themselves say. But maybe it's helpful to back up for a second. The town has in a sense, a series of regulations, restrictions incorporated as part of our bylaws. And they're fairly extensive. They've been there for many, many years. The town also has some parking regulations, and regulations as a separate body of the way we manage our town. Regulations are proposed after public hearings and adopted by the board itself, where bylaws have to only be changed by town meeting. So we have two sets of parking sort of parameters. And the board found in the past couple of years that as we wanted to make some modifications to our parking enforcement and rules and regulations, that we found these two areas are inconsistent with each other. They overlap, they sometimes conflict. And it made it very difficult for us to make some of the modifications we thought would be helpful to deal with the parking problem downtown. There are a couple of examples of that, and one, for example, we wanted to change the enforcement hours. I'll look to Bill to help me out here, from like 4 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon to deal with the influx of downtown workers, parking from 4, and they could park till 11 after they finished their shift at the restaurants. And that got in the way of patrons getting to finding parking available downtown. Another one was where we wanted to modify the enforcement from 1 hour during the winter season to 2 hours. And then we wanted to take that same kind of modification into the 2-hour district. But the 2-hour district is part of the bylaw. So changes such as that became they wouldn't work, quite frankly, without coming back to town meeting. So in consultation with Bill and town council, there are 2 articles on the warrant this year. 74, the first one, essentially says, let's set our bylaw parking rules and regulations aside and let parking be handled as purely a regulation function of the Board of Selectmen. After public hearings and input, and then changes could be made and implemented and enforced by the police. The other bylaw, if people don't like that one, 74, is a recodification of some of the elements of the bylaw itself to give more flexibility in some areas rather than others. So that's sort of my overview on the 2 articles, which are both attempts to provide the ability of the board and really the public to think about how we can make parking more readily accessible so there's appropriate turnover downtown. And Bill is the expert, and thanks for being with us.
I don't know about the expert. We try to keep up down there with the changes that happen. I think the biggest problem the police department has with the enforcement is as we make changes, we have to make sure they're done in a way that's consistent with good law. In the case this last winter, we had changed the hours for good reasons. Observations and studies showed that there was some abuse taking place of the parking spaces, virtually locking out the customers from being able to get to the businesses at night by various other people who were there, employees and things that were there all the time. And we tried to make some modifications to the enforcement hours to address that, and they were very successful until a individual who knows a little bit about the law realized that there was a conflict between a bylaw and the regulation, and therefore it undone everything that we had been working, quite frankly. And what we've found in working with the parking bylaw is it's, I don't know how old it is, but it's very inflexible. It doesn't allow even residents who have a legitimate want or desire to make a change to the residential parking district, for instance, to do so very easily. It does not allow any type of experimentation because generally something you're going to try is going to be less restrictive than what's in the bylaw, for instance, and the bylaw would then prevail. You can make it more restrictive with a regulation, but not less restrictive. And what we find happening is the board is often faced with having to make the choice between lesser desirable options than a full range of options. And, there's a lot of things we could do to try to improve the parking without impacting those people who truly use the parking if we had a wider range of options to try. And that's what this Article 74 does, is it allows us through the regulation process to amend the rules as we go, so we can try new things. And if it doesn't work, we can modify it without waiting a whole year for the next town meeting to come along and try to do it.
One other observation, again, with town council, our town council represents practically half the communities in the state of Massachusetts. And it's very unusual for parking regulations to be a bylaw. There are a couple of others, but I think basically my guess is this came about at a time when people had concerns and they felt the way to deal with those concerns was to come to town meeting with a bylaw. And that may have made great sense at that time, but it does, as the chief points out, make it very difficult to find modifications that we think are helpful. And this really has to be in some ways a mutual judgment between the citizens, primarily those who live and work downtown, to help them understand the restrictions that are in place today and to support, if they want to, an easier process of modification that we think will work for the benefit of everybody. An example of things we're considering, which is a little off the regulation issue, but is this idea of a shuttle between the fast ferries downtown and a parking facility right over here at 2 Fairgrounds. So we're trying to get that up and running. It may not make it this summer, but that's the hope. And that's another way to try and deal with the parking issues so that we find, for example, another one, Bill, was commercial vehicles parking overnight. And they're now,
Well,
you might speak to that, because it's an example of difficulty.
Yeah, the challenge is the definition of commercial vehicles. We all know what is happening is there are contractors who don't live on the island who come here in the morning to work and leave at the end of the day, and they leave their vehicles parked on streets downtown overnight. But the definition of a commercial vehicle as what's codified in state law doesn't address the problem for us. But we could address the problem if we had the flexibility with the regulations to do that.
So that's just another example of some specifics we're trying to deal with. So.
Folks, we're receptive to your questions, and in the absence of any written questions, I just want to throw out a question for either of you. It sounds like this is an arena in which it makes a lot of sense to experiment and try different things, and what could be the downside to this, if you just were wondering, why should I not be in favor of this?
Well, I think one possibility, and I'm not speaking as a downtown resident, but if I felt that I had a home in the old historic district and the bylaws gave me certain rights and privileges, I think someone, let's be honest, might say, I don't want to risk any of those rights and privileges being changed through a regulatory process. So we understand that. The idea here, regulations can only be changed after public hearings. And I think if you all watch that process periodically, you'll know that if there are a number of interested citizens come forward on an issue, the board is hopefully responsive to those. And so we would feel that we would do that. But that's an example of the kind of concern there might be out there.
Okay. If there are no other questions for this particular block of the program, I'd like to cycle back to the HDC restructuring. Actually, there is a question. Linda, you'll be poised to come up in just a moment. If Article 74 is passed, is Article 75 moot?
I should have mentioned that. Yes, it would be hoped if Article 74 passes, then Article 75, we would move that the town meeting take no action, and that would be the rational approach if 74 passed.
Okay, very good. Okay, we're going to, as I say, cycle back to the HDC restructuring, and Linda Williams, who's the chair of the HDC, can take a few minutes to give us her perspective. Okay. He already made this.
Well, I feel like
We were a little ahead of schedule. He's done his part, and
one hand tied behind my back. I was told a different time to be here. I think you guys are moving along a little fast. I'm Linda Williams. I'm the chairman of the Historic District Commission. I understand his presentation was brief and to the point that if we have appointed members, they'll come out of the woodwork somehow. Not going to happen. We went over this last year. We had a difficult time getting people to run for the open seats this year. I went out and spent too much beating the bushes trying to get people who wanted to spend 10 hours a week in meetings, 4 or 5 hours in gas, over a weekend doing viewings, every week, not every other week, and interacting with 150 applications a week. The refrain I got was even if they were appointed, they wouldn't serve because of the time commitment and the complexity and the fact that they need to have some sort of background in building or design. I had extensive conversations with the Ethics Commission a couple of weeks ago when an architect stepped forward to replace the valuable David Barham, who has retired from the HDC. And he brings a perspective and a knowledge to the HDC that is very hard to match, and he's going to be missed terribly. But he is a registered architect. And we needed somebody who could read a set of plans and understand the complexities of how windows meet, how doors work, how roof planes meet, and we just don't have that without David. I mean, I've been on for probably 17 years, and learning curve is still going on every single week. If you were to appoint most of the members of the HDC, the public would lose control. No other commission or board in this town interacts with the public as much as the HDC because we meet every week. And we are responsible directly to you. Appointments do not necessarily mean we're not going to get those who lunch crowd coming in, trying to get on the HDC, and the work that the HDC does, trying to protect what is special about Nantucket may be compromised. If only one person comes in and says, we'll take the time to be on the HDC, and they have no earthly idea what the HDC is, that's going to dilute it. If you have the courage of your convictions and you want to run and you want to spend that kind of time, then run. The HDC needs to maintain its separateness from another control of the selectmen and be responsible to you. We have 3 things that are going on right now that are positive momentum. We were in the process of rewriting the Act, which is a home rule petition, as well as this vastly premature article. We were in the process of doing that in the fall. Into December, we had a working draft, which was given to town council. We had extensive discussions with town council, and it went up to town council ostensibly to come up on the April town meeting. All of a sudden, in January, we find out from the Board of Selectmen that it is not coming up at April. And all progress on that stopped for a little while. They did say that they would put it on in the fall town meeting, which I understand is supposed to happen. So we were in the process of incorporating large parts of the 40C Enabling Act, which is not the one that covers Nantucket. We have our own act, which predates everybody by many, many years. And there are things in the State Enabling Act for the other towns that would work for Nantucket, and a lot of stuff in that Enabling Act that would not. So it's sort of a hybrid. So we're in the process of doing that. Hopefully it will continue to happen, because there's a lot of stuff in our act that is causing a lot of problems locally. There's also a work group that was established under Article 63 from last year that is working to improve the process and the functioning of the HDC. Right now, we're working on applications, then we're going to go to submission requirements, fee schedules, and everything else that is wrong with the HDC, and we all know it, what's wrong with it. There's a member of the legal community, the opponents to the HDC's process, the landscapers, designers, design build, HDC members, and it's a very productive group. Several of you in here have been there. And as of July 1, the CPC money will be available to hire a consultant to update building with Nantucket in mind. I feel somewhat sandbagged by this article because when they told us that we couldn't put the needed rewrite of the act in for April, we were never told that this was coming. They never came and discussed it with the HDC. It's being proposed by people who don't really understand the HDC process. And there's no way to know why it was set up this way, because this is one of the only towns in the state where the appeal process goes to the Board of Selectmen and not to district court or an independent arbitrator. Appeals from the HDC go to the Board of Selectmen, and it doesn't make any rational sense to have the appointing board be the appellant board, which means that they serve as judge and jury. It should be separate, completely separate, and not turned into a political football controlled by another body that would be subject to payback, favoritism, cronyism, and any other such unsavory reasons. We all know that there have been questionable appointments to all kinds of boards and commissions by the previous boards of selectmen. And we don't want the HDC, who serves a really important position in this town, to be subject to such things. And as I said earlier, that people would come out of the woodwork somehow to apply to the selectmen. That's simply not true. We have open seats that nobody runs for. They don't have to expend a single penny to run for it. They just have to put their name into the town clerk by the deadline, and they get the seat. So it's not going to ensure anybody comes out, because the people like David Barham, who's a retired architect who's qualified in more ways than one, don't come out of the woodwork, and we don't have them here. We have retired builders. They're not here often enough. I've spoken to some of them, and they're in Florida 3 or 4 months of the year, and you can't do that to the HDC. We meet every week, not once a month, like some of the other boards I'm on. So I just don't see the point of this. We sort of resent the disrespect on the part of the Board of Selectmen without even letting the HDC know this was coming, and without having a productive dialogue with the HDC in an open forum. So we're sort of trying to play catch-up here. But I think it's ill-timed and inappropriate, and we should wait to do the comprehensive rewrite, and perhaps some of those things in the Selectmen's article will be in the comprehensive rewrite. But the one thing the state hates, and I've been up to the state enough as the Housing Authority chairman, they have told us directly that they don't like piecemeal home rule petitions. One article needs to go up in the fall with the entire rewrite. But trust that the HDC realizes that there are a lot of problems, there's a lot of negativity in the public about the HDC, unnecessary evil. But we know what the problems are, and we're trying to fix them. But after 50 years of a legislation being in existence, over 50 years, you just don't do that overnight, and you have to have the backing of the town as well as the public. But this is not a good thing, and in the end, the HCC is accountable to you and the community, not 3 out of 5 members of the Board of Selectmen. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I have a couple questions here, and I'm going to start with a question that can either be a rhetorical question, or there may be somebody here who can answer on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. The question is, what makes the Board of Selectmen think there will be more interested candidates for appointment? And then a comment by the same person: I believe there is more heart for the position if the candidate has to work for it through campaigning to be elected by their peers. Appointment sounds like a good old boys network.
I agree with that statement 100%.
I thought you might. And
Yeah.
my question is to anyone in the audience, if they would like to address this, specifically the question of what makes the Board of Selectmen think there will be more interested candidates for appointment. If not, I'll move on to the next question. Are there any takers?
I can elaborate on that a little bit, Peter. The Ethics Commission ruled out basically all builders. And the design architectural community is qualified because they're bidding pre-construction. The issue with a lot of the designers I spoke to, and I spoke to every single one of them here for the most part, and I had other people speak to other ones, we were canvassing for 2 months looking for people. And the individual guys that don't have multiple people in their firms couldn't do it because they would have to hire somebody else to bring their plan in. So Ray Pohl from Botticelli and Pohl stepped up because his wife is an architect, they have a large staff, and they have other people that can bring their projects in, and Ray steps off because he would have a direct conflict. But that's why it was so difficult to find qualified people. You just don't have retired architects like David Barham. They don't grow on trees. If I had 5 David Barhams, I'd be happy as a clam, and the public would be fine.
Okay, there's another question here, which is dealing with the logistics of all this. Do you have an idea on how to address all these applications? Maybe 2 HDC elected upper, appointed lower level. Basically, how do you address the applications? Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I review all the applications every week, 150 of them, if necessary, and we pull out, pre-meeting, we pull out, I'm moving the window 6 inches. I'm putting a new deck on. I'm changing my roof color to an approved color. We pull all of those things out that would be like, open the file, okay, close the file. We pull them all out, up to 40, 45 items a week. We pull them out and put them on consent, and we approve them all at one time. We're beginning now to pull out other consent items that may need to move the window over here farther, and we approve those with a condition. So we're beginning to pull out large numbers of these stamp things, and then we're also pulling out several items that are going directly to automatic view, because sometimes we'll open a set of plans this thick and say, oh my goodness, I can't figure that out until I go look at it. So we pull out 15 to 20 of those items that go directly to automatic view. And then we talk to the applicants about where the polls go for the viewing. So we are beginning to pull a lot of stuff out. Through the rewrite, there is a section in the Act that does not allow you to give approval authority to the staff. That would be added probably to the Act, that your paid professional staff could say, well, we don't need to see the paint color change or the roof color change or whatever those things. So that's all part of the continuing process. Plus, the work group is redoing all the applications to make them simpler, up online. You can access them, which right now you can't. They're this long, and where you write on them and you have multiple copies. What are those things?
Okay, one other question.
Those things. We're getting rid of them.
This is a question that you may be able to answer, Linda, or possibly someone else. Why are most HDCs in Massachusetts appointed rather than elected?
We don't know. We were one of the first ones in the state back in the 50s. There was a massive rewrite in 1970. I think it was probably left as elected because at the time our appeal process went to the Board of Selectmen. That takes me back to, it doesn't make sense right now to have the Board of Selectmen appoint anybody when they're the ones that sit on the appeals. So there's a perception of a conflict running through this whole process. So that's probably why they left it that way. If they change who the appellant body is, that can be another discussion in the future.
We do have some time available, so I want to take the topic that someone has raised about, can someone speak to Articles 88 and 89? And the answer is yes, you can, if that person wants to come forward. And the question, the immediate question preceding that is, do the same arguments against Article 87 apply to Articles 88 and 89? Mr. Barnes.
Submitted the articles, I'd be happy to come up and...
All right, have a seat.
Come on in. Join the water. It's fine.
And you'll identify yourself for the tiny fragment of the population who may not know who you are, Mr. Barnes.
Curtis Barnes, ex-town crier, and sponsor of Articles 88 and 89, which were not recommended by FinCom. My objective in submitting both of these articles was to simplify a very complex process. As Linda stated, we were one of the first HDCs in the Commonwealth, in the country, in fact. That legislation has been amended dozens of times. My point in the one case was that in order to make any amendment, you have to go to the legislature. And if we turn our HDC Enabling Act eventually into a 40C procedure, then it's just like amending zoning. 2/3 vote at town meeting, you can amend it. You don't have to wait a year or maybe two to go back and hope the legislature takes action on it. So that was one objective. The article proposing appointment, as Dr. Mulcahy noted, the Board of Health was a very successful appointed board, and I feel that while Linda and I are very good friends, I think we could get some qualified people who would come out to stand for the HDC. And and these are sort of tied together, if we became a 40C, then the appeal would not be to the Board of Selectmen. So the conflict is eliminated because the appeal then goes to the Regional Planning Commission, and if not acted there or appeal from there, it goes to the Superior Court. I hope that satisfies the question, but I do want to say that I have been sitting in on the work group. I'm part of the process working with the team, and Linda and I have discussed where we are and where we're going, and I'm gratified and heartened by the fact that the entire act is being rewritten for future discussion and presentation. Unfortunately, one of the things about Nantucket is we poor citizens have to stick our articles in November, and the selectmen can wait till March to second guess or decide what they want to do. So when I put those articles in, it was to continue a discussion that hopefully was started last year. I feel now that progress is being made. Certainly the rewrite of the act in its own right absolutely must be done. And for us not to have it at this town meeting is disappointing, but if we are going to have a fall town meeting and we are going to be able to get it there, then my feeling is we should try to pull everything together, and I'm working as part of the team to make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes.
And we welcome, Peter, one more thing,
Yeah.
to second what Curtis said. The work group generally meets on Wednesdays at noon at the conference room at 2 Fairgrounds, not in this building. And we've been meeting every week or every other week. We do have a meeting coming up this Wednesday at noon, and we want input from any interested parties. We do have members of the public who do attend, and for this to work for the public, to make it more user-friendly, we're going to need to know what everybody who's had personal contact with the HDC on these forms and the submission requirements, what they think we should have and what we shouldn't have. But we need to move it along, basically kick the can down the road and get this done.
Okay. Our final topic area encompasses the numerous zoning articles.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. And here we've asked Andrew Gorse and Leslie Snell from the Town Planning Department to kind of take a forest rather than a trees view of these to help you see what the articles are intended to accomplish going forward. And together they're going to speak for about 20 minutes and then address your written questions. But before we start on that, I want to call on Patty Raghaveen to inform us of a late-breaking development regarding Articles 47 and 48. Patty?
It's more of a clarification than a late-breaking change in anything, so don't get too excited. It just came to our attention, and Andrew can speak to this as well, that because of the need for the public hearing and the publication or the notification on a public hearing, the change to take no action on the planning board will be made later this month, and so it will not make the cut for the publication. So when you get your warrant in the mail, the warrant at least Article 48, not 46 and 47 have already been solidified as take no action, but Article 48, that the Richmond Company has now asked the planning board to take no action on, or to support take no action, that will not appear so. It will still retain the positive recommendation, at least in the publication. The plan at this point, and Andrew can speak more to this, is to propose the change as a technical amendment at the town meeting floor. So it's not meant to be a trick or any of that, anything like that. We just want to make sure that you understand where we're coming from. It's just the process itself takes the time in terms of publication. So I wanted to make sure that this group understood that, because it's going to be important for people not to sort of see the printed warrant and think that something different. We do have the advantage, and I want to thank the Finance Committee. They have made a comment on this article, and that comment does hold true to the take no action component of this, and that will help, I think, help the public understand where we're coming from. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Okay, Andrew and Leslie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Peter, and thanks for inviting us again. And just to follow up on scheduling, April 3rd, the Planning Board will be holding a public hearing to discuss this article, taking a no action vote on that, as well as Article 58. So, and then we will report out at town meeting as part of a technical amendment. So the zoning articles, basically, we have 34 zoning articles this year. They are numbered from 35 to 68. Broken into categories, 22 of those are map changes, 1 submitted by a citizen, 12 are text or language changes, 3 submitted by a citizen, and those are 46, 48, and 66. That may sound like a lot of articles, but in reality, there's roughly 14 grouped areas of articles up for consideration at this town meeting. Planning Board has held extensive public hearings on the matter, and of those 34 articles, 9 are being recommended as written, 18 were recommended with modifications, and 7, including the likely vote on 48 and 58, received no action. So I'm going to speak on the 22 map changes, and then Leslie will speak on the 12 text changes. All of the maps, as we discussed earlier, are available on the town's website. I didn't bring those today. Last year, we didn't really have time to look at all those, but in the intervening 3 weeks, I think there's time to study those, and we are certainly available to ask questions. The first group is Articles 36 to 41, deal with the downtown area, and these are broken into 4 changes in the Brant Point neighborhood, 2 in the Washington Street corridor. The 4 Brant Point area articles generally deal with the phase-out of the limited commercial zoning district. That is being phased out either into residential or other commercial components. Part of this article did generate conversation at the public hearings, and the Planning Board has referred some of these back to the Brant Point area work group plan for further discussion. The 2 along Washington Street expand the ROH district by about 11 acres. Articles 42, 43, 44 are in the Mid-Island area. 42 and 43 are in the RC district around Old South Road and Sparks Avenue. Those received modified recommended action by the board. Article 44 was a citizen article that proposed to zone roughly 44 acres and 76 properties along Hooper Farm Road. It was submitted by a citizen, generated quite a bit of controversy, and that article has a no action recommendation. Articles 45, 49 through 51 deal with the Noshop Crossing Area Plan, and this is some of the Richmond property, some of the Valero property. These generally are phasing out of the residential commercial 2 zoning district, and these are all recommended by the Planning Board as consistent with the 2009 master plan. Articles 52 through 54 are related to South Shore Road and the Maya Comet neighborhood. 52 and 54 have been recommended with modifications. 53 has a no action recommendation, and aspects of these articles have been referred back to the Surfside Area Plan for further study. Articles 55 and 60 deal with open space. In this case, the zoning districts for protected open space is being aligned with the ownership of the underlying land. There's roughly 73 acres of land involved. In the town overlay district, the lowest intensity district, the R40, is used. In the country overlay district, the LUG3 district is used. So, and again, there are detailed maps available. Article 56 is a map change regarding the island lumber property. This does convert a portion of this from commercial, its original designation, from residential. The entire property at one point was commercial. With the expansion of Don Allen, the property owner has asked that it all be in commercial, and the planning board has recommended that. Article 57 is an area at Dukes Road and Hawthorne that was subject of some discussion at the special town meeting. Planning board has given that a positive recommendation, and generally that is a zoning article that lowers density. And finally, Sconset Articles 58 and 59 were zoning map changes that both will receive a no action and part of the ongoing negotiations that we've had with property owners regarding Baxter Road relocation. So that's the quick summary of those articles. Thank you.
All right. As Andrew mentioned, there are 12 bylaw amendments. Most of these bylaw amendments are very lengthy. They're detailed. It's difficult to summarize those quickly, so I would encourage everyone to read your warrant closely and read the planning board recommendation very closely. I'm going to group these together as well as I can just to make it quick. I'm going to discuss Articles 35 and 61, 46, 47, 48, 62, 64, 65, 63, 66, 67, and 68. Those are all bylaw amendments. Most of these bylaw amendments are an attempt to basically do some housekeeping, to clean up the bylaw, to make it more user-friendly, to enhance the organization, to reflect current permitting practices, and to reduce where there are overly burdensome requirements in the bylaw. Articles 35 and 61. 35 deals with the flood hazard overlay district, and 61 deals with the public wellhead recharge district. Both of those articles will ensure compliance with other state or federal regulations. 35 addresses the adoption of new floodplain maps that are required by FEMA. If those maps are not adopted, it will affect property owners' ability to obtain insurance coverage. Article 61, the Public Wellhead Recharge District, the changes that are proposed in that article will bring our bylaw up to compliance with the Department of Environmental Protection regulations and will update the CMR references. The only real substantive change in Article 61 would allow some automotive uses to be permitted by special permit within the wellhead. Currently, those are prohibited. Articles 46, 47, and 48 all come out of the Noshop Crossing Area Plan process. 46 was a citizen petition article. The planning board gave that a take no action recommendation. Article 47 was a corrective article. It would have created an overlay district called the Old South Commercial Overlay. The planning board also gave that a take no action recommendation. And Article 48 was the lift of the MCD cap in the Noshop Crossing Area Plan area. It would have been a portion of that area. And although the printed warrant says that the planning board recommends that article, we will be holding that special meeting on April 3rd to reconsider the motion to take no action. Articles 62, 64, and 65 are mostly housekeeping. They reorganize the existing bylaw language. There are some substantive changes in those articles. Article 62 addresses parking, driveways, and off-street loading, and 64 and 65 deal with pre-existing non-conforming uses, structures, and lots. The changes in Articles 64 and 65 were proposed generally by the, excuse me, I didn't realize that my iPad was connected to my phone. Sorry about that. Articles 64 and 65 were proposed by the Zoning Board of Appeals, and they are supportive of the language in those articles. Article 63 addresses the secondary lot provision of the zoning bylaw. It includes some provisions that were not previously contemplated. Both the Planning Board and Zoning Board have recently heard applications where people are proposing to do a secondary lot on pre-existing non-conforming lots. That was not something that the bylaw allowed, so we are proposing to include that provision and some other provisions for special permit relief that were not included in the bylaw before. Article 66 is a citizen petition to amend the definition of apartment. Currently, apartments are allowed in a few zoning districts, and they must be on the second or third floors or in the basement of a commercial structure. The proposed amendment would allow them on the first floor. The Planning Board did modify that to allow them on only a portion of the first floor so that the commercial character of the structure would be maintained. Articles 67 and 68 deal with the use chart in the zoning bylaw and various technical amendments. 67 allows additional uses in the commercial neighborhood district, and it adds a new use for a commercial shed. Article 68 modifies some definitions. It removes obsolete language that's left over from the building cap, and it cleans up the special permit section of the bylaw to reflect previous actions that were taken by town meeting. So again, those are the 12 bylaw amendments, and I would encourage you all to read those closely.
Peter, could I just add too that as part of our ongoing effort to put some additional information of some of this terminology in zoning districts that we use quite freely and others may need some help on, we've included a glossary in the back of the warrant, as well as a more detailed planning board report. So the standards for the zoning districts and a glossary of terms, plus the planning board additional report is located in the back of the warrant.
Good, so this would be sort of planning 101 for people who want to know a bit more about how all this works. I was going to just ask a general question as one who, every year there are so many zoning articles that seem to be dealing with very narrow, specific, we have to clean things up. I almost have the sense that it's like taking your car and saying the mechanic says the timing is off, we have to change a different thing. Once you get all these things fine-tuned every year, where does next year's crop of little things that need to be fine-tuned come from? What process gives rise to the continuing flow of things that need to be adjusted, just from a layman's perspective?
Sure. I mean, I think we're following a schedule laid out in the 2009 master plan, which is also available online. As part of the implementation schedule, you can see what zoning districts are scheduled to be phased out, and hopefully we're keeping up with that. There's dates, certain dates by, or dates when certain districts should expire, and we're bringing forward the articles basically in conformance with that schedule. Generally, master plan has a 10-year life, and so we're 5 years into it, halfway into it at this point. Last year, we did take a little bit of a break. We had only 10 articles. I did say that this year we did have to have some catch-up, though, by taking that break. So we've also learned that even though in order to avoid confusion, we've had articles in the past where we have a single article trying to accomplish multiple things, and that has generally led to confusion. So we have followed a course which is more directly kind of lists one item at a time, which I think, as I said at the beginning, even though we have 34 articles, there are really 14 general areas that we're looking at.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I would just add with the bylaw changes, just during my time on Nantucket, the level of citizen petition bylaw changes have decreased dramatically. And I think over the years, various, citizen proposed bylaw changes were added into the bylaw, but it was never really tidied up to be a more cohesive, user-friendly document. So we're doing a lot of that now, too.
So we really want to keep in mind that there is a master plan, and what you're doing is you're really essentially harnessing the forces of the marketplace and saying we want to kind of keep them pointed toward the long-term plan that we have and essentially actualize or realize the long-term objectives. That's what all these little elements are about.
Correct.
Okay, there's a big picture. I have a question on Article 48, and you might say what Article 48 is so people know what we're talking about, then I'll tell you what the question is.
Article 48 would have, in part, lifted the MCD cap in a portion of the Noshop Crossing Area Plan Overlay District. 48 was really linked to 47. Article 47 would have created the area that 48 would have been applicable to. There's currently a cap on retail development. You can have 20,000 square feet of gross floor area of retail space. That's island-wide except in the mid-island planned overlay district where there's no cap. Article 48 would have created a lift of that cap for a portion of the Noshop Crossing Area Plan area for up to 45,000 square feet of gross floor commercial retail
Okay.
use.
Here's the question about that article. What is the likelihood that Article 48 will be submitted at special town meeting where there is much less public attendance? And I guess the premise is that they're assuming there is a special town meeting, what is the likelihood that it would be submitted then this fall?
I would point out it's a citizen petition article. It wasn't sponsored by the planning board.
All right. And the next question is, why did planning originally approve the Valero-Glowacki plan only to change it to take no action?
I assume that's related to Article 47, that question, because there hasn't been an approval of a plan. There has been a recommendation on a warrant article.
Okay.
The sponsors had requested that the article be not considered, and under those circumstances, it made sense not to proceed with it.
Okay, I hope that clarifies the question that was posed by someone that I got here. Patty?
I'm in a unique position to obviously answer it, so I didn't know if that would be appropriate or not.
Patty can answer my question.
Yeah. Did you want to answer either of the questions that were posed about Article 48, or come up to one of the mics, though? Just make sure your mic is on there.
Oh, yeah, thank you. It's funny how fast you forget. The answer to the question as to whether or not, or as to why we've now sought a recommendation of take no action has a lot to do with the public feedback that we're getting with respect to questions that still exist. We feel it's really within our responsibility to make the public more comfortable, more aware, to answer some more questions before we actually take it to town meeting for consideration. So really, it is within the context of our continued effort to let you know, as the public, what's going on with respect to the properties, and for us to hear more from you about what that might look like. As far as, and I think I've had the question before at the FinCom meeting, there is no scheduled fall town meeting at the time, and whether or not we go forward will have a lot to do with how we feel with respect to the public. So it can't really be answered, but okay.
Fair enough. At this point, I'd like to ask if there are any other questions to be submitted, and if not, we do have some time for anyone else in the audience who wants to raise a question or make a statement about any other article that is on the warrant. I don't see any hands going up, so I thank you all for your attendance. Remember to tell your friends and colleagues that this will be rebroadcast repeatedly on genotv.com, Channel 99, and nctv18.org, Channel 18. And we also invite you to attend the meeting 2 weeks from now for Meet the Candidates. Thank you for attending.